I picked this drink because it's on theme, and I picked this mug because it describes this movie. My parents were fairly strict about controlling what kind of media I interacted with as a kid. There were a lot of things that I just wasn't allowed to watch at all, and the things that I was allowed to watch were normally like very old things that my mom grew up with, and nostalgia blinded her from seeing anything wrong with them. So growing up, I had two favorite movies. The Dark Crystal, which I stand by, it's still an amazing movie, and The Last Unicorn. The Last Unicorn came out almost 2 decades before I was born. It's so old that it's one of those movies where the credits happen before the movie actually begins. Like there's a 2-minute introduction and then 5 minutes of credits and then the movie actually starts. And I did really enjoy this movie as a kid, but I haven't really ever heard anybody else talk about it, probably because it's like very old and not good. However, it turns out you can watch it for free on YouTube, and it just randomly popped up in my recommended, and I was like, it's been forever since I've seen that, I should watch it. And because I haven't seen it since I was about like 5 or 6, there was not a lot that I remembered about it, but I'll tell you what I did remember. I remember that there was a lot of emphasis put on what her eyes looked like, and I remembered that there was a lot of nudity. And obviously, as I was watching the movie, some things kind of seemed familiar, but honestly, in this like hour-and-a-half long movie, a lot of it I didn't remember, but also a lot of it is not very memorable. So, also since I did watch this on YouTube, it wouldn't let me take any screenshots or screen record anything, so all I have is some stills that I got from Google. So unfortunately, I can't show you any clips. So apparently this movie is also based on a book, which it tells you in the credits, but I've never heard of this book before. I don't know how much of the book is adapted into the movie. I hope they cut out like a bunch of parts from the book, because this movie is so disjointed and confusing at times. The way time passes in this movie doesn't make a lot of sense, and changing from scene to scene is either incredibly jarring or done completely through like a song transition. Because it's a musical sequence, you're not exactly sure what's reality and what's just like, you know, musicalness. And the music in this movie is weird. That was one of the very first things I noticed, because like I said, you get like a very short clip that's like not even 2 minutes, and then the opening credits, and the opening credits has a song over it that is so literal. All of the songs in this movie are obviously written for the movie. This movie is before jukebox musicals were like really a thing. All of the songs in this movie are actually only one song, just with lyrics swapped out to talk about what's happening in that particular scene, and the lyrics are always so dramatically on the nose. For example, our opening scene talks about how there's a unicorn in the forest, and it's the last unicorn. It's the name of the movie. This was not a surprise to us. But then the song that's over the credits is just talking about how she's the last unicorn, and that's it. There's no like backstory, there's no like hint as to what happens to the unicorn, which I guess is kind of what the mystery of the movie is. But the lyrics are legitimately like, oh, you're the last one and it's sad, and like imagine if there was one last lion. What would it be like if there was only one rhino left? Like, they're incredibly shallow lyrics, and I was like, it's the opening title sequence of the song, it's whatever. And then anytime there's a transition, the same song plays, but with the on-the-nose lyrics swapped out for whatever is happening in the new scene. For example, there's a scene where she's walking in the rain, and I wrote down the exact lyrics because I was like, god damn. So the lyrics for the same song, but the portion where she's walking in the rain comes, then a pause, dreary, another pause, I have no shelter. That's it. Basically, since it's raining, the song was about how it's raining. At a different part in the movie where we're, again, transitioning from scene to scene, the same song plays, except now we're looking out over the ocean, and I didn't write the lyrics down for this one, but the lyrics are pretty much, look at the fish, they're playing in the water, wow, fish. If the song mentions stars, there are stars being shown to us visually. And like I said, since it's the same song every single time, it's incredibly boring after like the 4th time they play it. And I'm not gonna lie to you, anytime I started hearing the song, I just immediately started skipping forward. Because the entire movie grinds to a halt in order to listen to this song again. Like, there's no new information being conveyed through the song. It's literally just a way for them to show a confusing passage of time. Okay, but before our opening credits, we get like a very short conversation between 2 hunters, I think, talking about how this forest has the last unicorn. The unicorn overhears them and is like, what? I can't possibly be the last unicorn. And then we get introduced to the worst character of the whole movie. There's a butterfly, but you know how in the Transformers movie, Bumblebee can only talk through his radio, and like he can only speak and convey messages through his radio, through songs and like talk shows and stuff. This butterfly is surprisingly similar. All he can do is sing something else he's already heard, and talk about riddles he's already heard, and say things he's already heard. And so for like a good 5 minutes, all he's doing is like quoting random songs and random shit. And the unicorn is trying to ask him questions, and it's incredibly annoying and incredibly frustrating. And it goes on for a long time. And then the unicorn gets frustrated, so she tries to leave, and then he finally starts to answer her questions. So he could talk the whole time, he was just being an asshole. And when he does start to answer her questions, he gives her one piece of information and then fucks off. So this is like almost a 7 to 10 minute long scene. We got one piece of information that was not helpful from an incredibly annoying character. It was such a waste of time, if I'm honest. It was incredibly annoying. Because this entire scene could have been boiled down to: the unicorn asks the butterfly if he's seen any other unicorns. He says the Red Bull chased them to the ends of the earth. So we're introduced to the Red Bull. That was the whole point of that like 10 minute long scene with an incredibly annoying butterfly being a jackass, was to introduce the concept of the Red Bull. Anyways, at this point in the movie, the unicorn has decided she must leave the safety of her forest to go find the other unicorns. Something else I noted is that when the unicorn is thinking and when the unicorn is speaking, it sounds the exact same. So it's kind of hard to tell what she's saying and what she's thinking. Also, because this movie came out in the very early 80s, the animation is very early 80s animation, so that honestly doesn't help. I cannot tell when she's thinking something to herself and when she's saying something out loud. But anyways, at this point, we're like already 20 to 30 minutes into the movie, and she has just now decided that she's going to leave the forest. So, time is so weird in this movie. Then she starts like walking along the road. Again, we hear this transition song. It's the same song it always is. Time is confusing. There's a lot of scenes of her like walking through a desert and then the snow, but they also mentioned at the beginning of the movie that the unicorn being in the forest prevents it from snowing there. So was she journeying for like many months, or did she just journey far enough away from the forest that she's now in a place where it can snow? Those questions are never answered. Anyways, as she continues on her journey, we learn that most people actually cannot see that she's a unicorn. They just see her as a white mare, which is pretty standard mythologically speaking, because the mythology in this movie is bizarre. This begs the question, is the point of the movie that the world has lost its magic? I don't know, and I don't think the movie knows either. I honestly don't know if this movie has a point. So it's established that people can't see that she has a horn because magic is lost in the world or something. I don't think that's actually ever stated. I think that's the only explanation I can come up with for why people can't tell. Because our next character that we meet can tell that she's a unicorn, and she says something along the lines of, because of the world these days, people can't see that she's a unicorn. But I don't really understand how the world nowadays, we've never seen her before, and there's really not much going on now because she's really only met like one person. And they weren't mean to her. And then at the very beginning of the movie with the two hunters, they were very respectful of the unicorn and left her forest. So I don't understand like what's going on in the nowadays of this time that would make people not be able to see the unicorn. Is this a loss of a belief in magic? It can't be that because of things we see later on in the movie. I don't know. This movie doesn't know either, as far as I'm aware. Anyways, this brings us into our next part of the movie. The unicorn on her journey decides to sleep, and then a caravan drives by, and this caravan is headed by a woman named Mommy Fortuna. Not Mama, Mommy. I don't know why they went with Mommy, but they did, and all of the characters also call her Mommy, and it's kind of weird. Anyways, she's an old witch lady who can see the unicorn as a unicorn and not just a horse. We meet one of her henchmen that I do not remember the name of, and we meet a wizard boy, who I called Wizard Boy for a long time, but I will reveal something shocking later on about Wizard Boy. Anyway, even though I called him Wizard Boy for most of my notes, his name is... what is his name? Smendrick? Schmendrick. Yes, that's it. Okay. His name is Schmendrick. This is a direct translation of a Yiddish word meaning like a fool, so not very subtle there. I did have to look it up though. And I looked it up because I was worried this might be a slur because this was in the 80s and I can't trust movies that were made in the 80s. As far as I could tell in like a 5-second Google search, it is not a slur though, it is just another way to say a stupid person. Anyway, so Schmendrick is a wizard. No, he's not technically a wizard. What did they call him? He's basically a wizard, but they don't call him a wizard. He's traveling with Mama Fortuna, who is a witch. Not Mama, sorry. Mommy Fortuna, who is a witch. And then there's just like a guy that's with them. Mommy Fortuna puts a spell on the unicorn to give her a horn that will be visible for everyone, and then basically kidnaps her to put her in this like show with a bunch of other mythological beasts. And this is where I was talking about earlier, how the mythology of this movie is just weird. Everything in this movie is like extremely surface level. Like I said before, we have no knowledge of what the kingdom or even the world is like before this movie begins, and we don't even really know what's going on in most of the world currently. We're just following this one very specific little group of people and their quest, but anything beyond their teeny tiny circle we know nothing about. Mama Fortuna has like a bunch of creatures captured that she has people viewing for money, I guess. So she has an old lion trapped in a cage, and it says it's a manticore. She has a monkey, but says it's a satyr, and the image they used for the satyr is not how I would have pictured a satyr. And then she has a snake, and the illusion is that it's the world serpent, the Midgardian serpent. They legitimately say this is the Midgardian serpent. He holds the world in his coils. How did Norse mythology get involved in this? And also, what? I get that like the townsfolk viewing these are supposed to be like willing to see the magic and kind of dumb and easily tricked. But if you have a snake that is holding the world, how could it possibly fit in a cage? Anyways, there's also a harpy. So we also have some Greek mythology in there, but also if you know anything about harpies, you know what they look like. And you're probably thinking, this movie is rated G, for general audience. They probably didn't draw the harpy the way harpies look. They absolutely did. There are so many boobs in this movie. So many boobs. In mythology, harpies are half woman, half bird, so they have like huge boobs. And they kept that in this kids movie. Anyways, the harpy is not an illusion, the harpy is real. The unicorn is also not an illusion. She is real but has an illusion of a horn, because for some reason people can't see the horn, but some people can. For example, Schmendrick can. So he can see that she's a unicorn and he wants to let her out. But he's also kind of a sham. Like, he is a magician, but also like he's not good at doing magician things, but sometimes he is. But also sometimes he isn't. It's very confusing. Also, something really confusing about his magic is it goes back and forth on whether or not he even can do magic, and if he can do it, can he do it properly? And also how he controls his magic. For example, a lot of times when he's trying to do magic, he's just saying gibberish. It's just gibberish words muttered under his breath, occasionally something in English saying like, please do this, please work for me. It's almost like they told the voice actor to just make up his own spells, because it's so weird. It's just like muttered, unintelligible words, and occasionally some words in English about what the spell is trying to happen. And those never work, but occasionally he'll just go, magic, do what you will, and then his spells will work. It's very confusing. Anyways, he's trying to free the unicorn and is using all these spells, and none of the spells are working. And then he just pulls out a keyring and he's like, I guess I'll just unlock it this way. What was the point? Wasted so much of my time. Anyways, he lets the unicorn out. The unicorn lets everybody else out, including the harpy. The harpy and the unicorn have a very brief fight before the harpy kills Mommy Fortuna, and then Schmendrick and the unicorn escape into the woods. So this was a very long sequence that wasn't really needed, but now we have Schmendrick, who is our other main character. At this point, we're like at least a third of the way into the movie at this point, and we just now got our second main character. And also, the unicorn just now has started on her quest for real. Because at first she just heard there was a Red Bull, and that was all the information she had, and was legitimately just wandering around. Schmendrick has information about the Red Bull, kind of. Schmendrick tells her that there are so many stories about the Red Bull and the king associated with the Red Bull that it's hard to even decide what is true because there are so many stories. By the end of the movie, none of this matters. So why was it brought up? There's a conversation between the unicorn and Schmendrick about, is the Red Bull a ghost? Is it actually real? Is it a spell conjured by a magician? Is it holding the king captive? Does the king use it for his own gain? Do they really not know each other? They just kind of live symbiotically? And we never get the answer. And also, it doesn't matter. If we had the answers, it really wouldn't change anything about the story. And that's kind of what I mean about everything in this movie is so surface level. The unicorn has no personality, but we're also told that unicorns don't have feelings. Specifically, they're really big about unicorns can't feel regret, but also like Schmendrick wants to be like a fancy good magician, but that's his only character trait. We know nothing about his backstory, we know nothing about him, that's it. And when we're almost halfway through the movie, we meet our final main character of our trio. It's like a trio. This group is like 3 people, and it's about halfway through the movie that we finally meet the third person in our trio. And this person is also just as surface level as everyone else. Almost halfway through the movie is where we meet like this band of thieves, and it's really bizarre because it's very clearly supposed to be like a riff off Robin Hood, but then Robin Hood is mentioned, and then the like king of the bandits, or like the leader, gets very upset and is like, Robin Hood's not real, how dare you, gets very upset. Schmendrick then like conjures up visions of Robin Hood, and all the thieves except for like the king of the thieves run off to go chase the visions. If that sounds completely out of nowhere, it was completely out of nowhere also in the movie. If there's not a song transitioning you between scenes, they just kind of happen back to back. Unicorn and Schmendrick are walking, all of a sudden they're captured by thieves, all of a sudden out of nowhere he just stands up, says some magic words, and then visions happen. It's all like simultaneously way drawn out and super fast paced. It's an incredibly jarring experience. The thieves end up tying Schmendrick to a tree, and this is another part where like his magic is so confusing, because sometimes he can do like super fancy intense things, and other times he needs a spell to untie himself from a tree, and instead of that happening, the tree turns into a very large-breasted woman that's in love with him, and he motorboats it basically. Anyways, they use this to get away from the thieves that have captured them, and then we meet Molly. Molly was the wife of the king of the thieves? Is the wife of the king of the thieves his girlfriend? It's very confusing, but I'm pretty sure it specifically mentioned that she's his wife, and then she just like goes with them. And the reason I find that so confusing is because she and Schmendrick obviously end up getting together, because you have a man and a woman, and the only thing men and women are allowed to do is get together in the end of a movie. They're never allowed to just like be friends or companions. But I'm like, was she married to that guy? Did he just steal somebody's wife? What? Anyway, so almost halfway into the movie is where we meet Molly. Molly at first is pissed to see the unicorn. She can see that it's a unicorn, but she's very upset. Why is she upset? The movie does not tell us. She's upset that she did not see the unicorn when she was a child. Why? Who knows? Anyways, that lasts for like maybe 30 seconds, and then she's like, okay, let's go. I'm on this quest too now. And now that we're halfway through the movie, we're finally getting to the kingdom that we've been trying to get to this whole time, which is very confusing. If this movie only had like 15 minutes left, and the movie was about the journey to get to the castle, fine. If we had like an hour left in the runtime, and the bulk of the movie was going to be at the castle, fine. But half of the movie was dedicated to just getting a group of people together, and the back half of the movie all takes place in this one castle. Just let me explain. So we get to the castle at nighttime, and when the sun goes down, the Red Bull comes out. The Red Bull comes out, sees the unicorn, and tries to chase her down. Molly's like, Schmendrick, do something, you've got magic. Schmendrick is like, okay, fine, and then, oh, big twist, he turns the unicorn into a woman? Question mark. It's either a woman or a girl. The unicorn sings a song about being a woman, but Molly specifically calls her girl. After she's transformed into a human, the bull obviously leaves her alone because she's no longer a unicorn. Molly is very upset because she's like, if you put a unicorn in a human body... Actually, I don't think she knows that that's a bad thing yet. She's just upset that it happened. We find out later on why it's bad, but at this point, I don't think they know. I think she's just upset that it happened. Schmendrick is like, it's the only way that the bull would leave her alone. The unicorn is very upset, basically says she would rather be dead. Fair enough. After she's turned into a woman, they're like, okay, well now we can go up to the castle because you're not a unicorn. We can just kind of like go into the castle and try and figure out what's going on. I don't know what they thought was gonna happen. The whole goal of this is to find the other unicorns, and they want to just walk in and ask the king, I guess? Are they wondering if they just walk in, the Red Bull will be like, look, this is where the unicorns are? Anyway, so they walk up to the guards who are like at the gate, and this is where things got kind of weird. In order to convince the guards to let them in, Schmendrick tells them that Unicorn is his niece. I have been referring to Schmendrick as Wizard Boy in my notes because he looks 20, maybe. Also, when Molly had her first interaction with the unicorn, she acts like very devastated, as if she's like 80 years old and she's been waiting her whole life for this. She does not look 80. There's not a single wrinkle on her face. Anyway, so I was really confused by this, and I was like, is the unicorn supposed to be like a child? And they just made her look older than a child? I looked it up. Schmendrick is supposed to be like 40 to 50 years old. First of all, he doesn't look anything like that age. He legitimately still looks like a child. Which then, I guess Molly is supposed to be the same age, which makes a little bit more sense that she's been lamenting that she's been wanting to see a unicorn her whole life, and it's not until she's in her old age that she finally sees one. I honestly don't see why that would matter, but whatever. Anyways, they give the unicorn the fake name Amalathea. I watched this movie like less than an hour ago and I can't remember how they pronounce it. Amalathea? I remember at first when they pronounced it, I thought they said Amalafia, which I looked up what that meant. That's just a town in Italy, and I was like, that doesn't seem right. So I tried Amalathea, and that name makes a lot more sense. That's the name of the goddess who was a goat and nursed Zeus. Then after she was done nursing Zeus, like Zeus was an adult, they took her horn, and her horn is what made the cornucopia. So that makes a little bit more sense. The direct translation of the name is Tender Goddess, so that makes way more sense than just some random town in Italy. Anyway, she's a human now, she's pissed about it, she's acting all mysterious. The king is like, I know that you're not a normal person, and when he looks in her eyes, he sees a reflection of the forest and gets unnaturally angry that he can't see his own reflection in her eyes, which you have to be like really close to a person to see your own reflection in their eyes, and he was not that close. There's this random blonde like soldier standing around, and he's like, don't yell at her, that's not nice, or something to that effect. Anyways, this guy's the prince. We don't find that out until later. I don't know why we don't find that out until later. Again, the pacing of this movie is weird. And time has already been passing really weird in this movie, and at this point, I lose all concept of time. Schmendrick convinces the king that he can be his magician for him, so the king lets them stay there, but like, it's clear that they're not really making an effort to continue on in their quest. They're just kind of at the castle. We get another one of our transition songs that's the same song, and it's a lot of just the unicorn looking out over the sea. It's a lot of the prince, I guess, trying to win her affection, but it really doesn't seem like that's what's happening. And that's it. It's just like a whole song of people doing nothing. I don't know how much time is supposed to be passing. There's no indication that they're trying to figure out where the Red Bull is or where the other unicorns are. It just looks like nothing is happening. Then Prince is talking to Molly. He's like, I love her. I forget her name. I love her, but she doesn't like me. The prince is now fully convinced that he's in love with her, even though he has no personality. But then again, nobody else in this movie does either, so I don't know if that's just like the way the movie is, or if it's just like princes in general in movies don't have a personality. So he's talking with Molly in the kitchen about how much he loves her, and for some reason Molly is like super on board with the unicorn and the prince getting together. Out of everyone, I thought she would be one of the people that's like, no, she's a unicorn, we have to make sure that she stays a unicorn, because she like freaked out so much when she got changed into a human initially. But anyways, they talk for like not even 30 seconds. It's like maybe 5 lines of dialogue, and then we go straight into another song. This song is now from the prince's perspective about how much he loves the unicorn, that at this point hasn't ever said a word to him. Because that's kind of the big thing, is he's upset because she won't even talk to him. But of course, he's for sure in love with her. Unicorn then has a nightmare. They sing another song about how much they're in love, because I guess she's in love with him now. Again, very confusing about how much time has passed, what's going on, have they talked? I don't know. And then out of nowhere, there's this like a cat that's only been there for like a visual gag. It has like a peg leg and like an eye patch, so it's like a pirate cat, and it's only been there as like a visual gag, and all of a sudden it starts talking. It starts talking to Molly, it has a pirate accent, and she just acts like this is completely normal. Like this is not surprising at all. So this cat can talk, which is news to me, but apparently not news to the people in the story. Not only does this cat suddenly start talking, he suddenly just tells her how to find the Red Bull. He just is like, hey, you want to know how to find the Red Bull? I'll tell you. What? This stupid cat had the answer the whole time and just didn't say anything for however long they've been there. Apparently a long enough time for the prince to fall in love with her and her to start feeling like less of a unicorn and forgetting who she is and turning more into a human, but just never brought it up and now brings it up completely unprompted. Something really nitpicky, but this also annoyed me. The cat, before it talks, purrs. Then after it starts talking, instead of purring, he just says the word purr. Anyway, so the cat gives them like a riddle instead of just telling them where the Red Bull is. And then that's all we see of the cat. As stated earlier, the unicorn is starting to forget that she's a unicorn. She's decided she's in love with the prince and doesn't even want to try and find the other unicorns. Schmendrick is like, no, we gotta find the other unicorns. And so she starts to cry, and apparently that's not allowed. Apparently only humans cry, unicorns cannot cry. Going back to the idea of unicorns don't have feelings, which is a bizarre take. There's like an altercation scene with the king and the unicorn, and he's like, I've known you're a unicorn this whole time. And I'm like, why the fuck didn't you do anything sooner about this then? Why are you just like chill about this? Why didn't you... What? His whole thing is that he keeps the unicorns trapped in the ocean. By the way, they don't explain that. They just want you to remember that at the beginning of the movie they said that the Red Bull drove all the unicorns to the end of the earth. They expect you to extrapolate that that means the ocean. I mean, I already knew because I've seen this movie before, but you tell me, if somebody said the end of the earth, would you automatically think they're just chilling in the ocean? I mean, I guess in a very technical sense, the end of the land is the water. Anyway, so he just like spills this whole like, I keep all the unicorns locked in the ocean and I'm gonna do that to you too, but then hasn't done it for however long she's been here, even though he's known she's a unicorn since she showed up. Still doesn't do it now, and then just like walks away. Like he looks into her eyes and doesn't see the forest anymore, which is supposed to signify that she's turning more into a human. But then just like he just leaves. I don't understand anybody's motivation in this movie. Then we get a very sudden change of scene because that's how this entire movie works. And they're now in a completely brand new part of the castle that we've never seen with a skeleton that's almost just as annoying as the fucking butterfly from the beginning of the movie was. All it does is laugh at anytime anybody says anything. It's incredibly annoying. At this point, I don't know what's happening. Just point blank. The riddle that the cat told is never actually solved. At least not, they don't tell us the answer to the riddle. As cheap as it is to have your characters be like, that's what they meant when they said this. As cheap as that is, at least it's clear that the characters have solved the riddle. This is just a scene that happens that gets them to where they were supposed to be. There's no mention of the riddle again. There's no explanation of how they solved it. They meet the skeleton. He wants wine. They don't give him wine. They give him an empty bottle, but he acts as if it was wine, which is very confusing. He's a skeleton, and they mention that specifically that he can't feel the effects of wine and he cannot taste wine. So it would follow that if he also cannot see, then he would not realize that the bottle is empty. But he has a line earlier on in the scene that explicitly says that he can see things going on in the room. So I don't know why he would have realized that the wine bottle is empty. I don't know what's going on in this scene. It does not make a lick of sense. They give him the wine. He tells them they have to walk through the clock because that's walking through time. I don't know what that means. I don't know what's going on. They turn around to go head towards the clock, and then he's like, wait, you've got a unicorn with you. She's been standing there the whole time. She's been there the whole time. But just now, right as they're turning to leave, the skeleton's like, hey, that's a unicorn, and then like snitches on them, like starts screaming, there's a unicorn, somebody come get her. But also like the king said he knew that she was a unicorn. Why? What is happening in this scene? So they rush over to the clock and just kind of like walk at it and then like disappear. It's not a secret passageway. There's no like portal, or I guess there is a portal, it's just not shown at all. They just kind of like show up in a different location that's just like mist. The unicorn goes through, Molly goes through, and then the prince just like appears with them. Like he didn't walk through the clock, he's just there. The king shows up and starts fighting with Schmendrick. Then he goes through the clock too, and instead of following them, the king just like destroys the clock. So the king destroys the clock for no reason. They're now trapped in the bull's lair. The prince is also there now. They ask him how he knew that he had to walk through the clock, and he says, I didn't know, I just followed the unicorn girl. He was not there in the previous scene, but he is now. I don't know what's going on. So they're in the tunnel with the bull. The bull sees the unicorn in her human form, but has finally figured out that she is in fact a unicorn. So he starts chasing her. She falls down, hurts her ankle, so Schmindrick turns her back into an actual unicorn. After this, they're just like running in circles around the beach. The bull is trying to like push her into the water. It's very boring. There's not a lot happening. Schmindrick says magic won't help her, only a hero will help her, which is the cue for the prince to, I guess, fight the bull. But then he doesn't. He just stands in front of it and gets killed? Question mark? He just kind of like stands in front of it, and it cuts to him like just falling down on the beach. Is he dead? I think so, because he doesn't move after that. Not the best hero move, in my opinion. Anyways, after the unicorn sees her love interest, I guess she still has feelings, even though she's in unicorn form now. And that's another thing. They ended up telling the prince that she's not a human, she's a unicorn, and he was like, that's fine, I love who I love. And they were like, no, like she's legitimately an animal? And he was like, I love who I love. So I'm like, is this the movie's way of saying that the prince is down with bestiality? Anyways, the unicorn sees that her love interest is hurt and decides to fight back against the bull. And that's it. That's the way the conflict is solved. Instead of just running away and being forced into the water, she fights back. And that works, and that's it. She fights the bull goes into the water, and all the unicorns come out of the water. And that's it. That's how the bull was destroyed. If she had tried at any other point in the movie to fight back, this movie would have been like maybe 5 minutes long. I don't understand. But, you know, it's a happy ending. All the unicorns are now free. They run away onto the land. The tower crumbles, and the king, I guess, dies because he was in it. Still confusion about whether or not he and the bull are connected. Because if they weren't connected, then the Red Bull would still be a problem. It's just in the ocean now, which clearly it's really easy to get out of the ocean because the unicorns did it the second the bull wasn't nearby. So the unicorns leave. The last unicorn, who is no longer the last unicorn, brings the prince back to life. I don't understand why they brought him back to life. If they had left the prince dead, that would have solved a lot of our weird romance issues. Like, she didn't want to actually be a unicorn because she was now in love with the prince, and he was like willing to fuck a unicorn. So by him being dead, I feel like that solves a lot of issues. But they bring him back to life. Then he's like, oh, I wish I could tell her how I feel. Anyways, the prince goes off and does fuck all. Then Schmindrick and Molly decide they're gonna get together. Again, I thought she was married, but apparently that doesn't matter anymore. The unicorn appears to them one final time, and she's like, you're a real magician now, and he's like, okay. It's a little bit confusing because at the end they say she's still part human because she can feel regret. Regret for what? I'm not sure. If it's regret for just not being able to marry the prince like she wanted to. I feel like she could still do that if she really wanted to. She's not the last unicorn anymore. I feel like she could give up being a unicorn and marry the prince. I don't see why you would want to do that, but she could. Anyways, that's how the movie ends. This movie is just all around not good. There are some scenes that are so drawn out and such a waste of time, like the butterfly scene. Honestly, the scene with the skeleton lasted way longer than it needed to. There are so many just like screeching halts in the whole plot line so that we can sing the same song we've already sang many times. But then also, sometimes there's something happen and then all of a sudden we're in a brand new location and a brand new scene with brand new things happening. It's so disjointed and nobody has a personality in this whole story. Nobody has any motives that are not completely on the surface level. The prince is in love with the unicorn. That's his one trait. The unicorn, I don't know if she even has a trait. She's just kind of weird. Molly also doesn't really have anything. She's just kind of there. At the beginning, she's like, the unicorn is like a perfect creature and I want to help it. And then all of a sudden, she's like, nah, it's chill if this unicorn stays a human forever, even though she's the last one, and marries this like human man. And Schmindrick is like, I want to be a wizard. That's his only thing. It's so much nothing. Because she was the last unicorn, but there also didn't seem to be anything wrong with that. Again, we don't see like a before and after of what happened to the kingdom without the unicorns. Nobody seemed to really notice. She didn't even notice until somebody told her. So what's the problem? There wasn't even a problem to be solved by freeing the unicorns. There's a lot in this movie that just doesn't make sense because the characters don't really have a motive. I feel like if any of these characters had any slight motive, I think it would make more sense for why things are happening. But it also feels like they're kind of just in it for the vibes, you know? They're at the castle for assumedly a long amount of time, but they put in no effort into leaving. Until a cat comes up to her and says, this is how you leave. And again, there's no actual effort shown into figuring out how to leave. We're just suddenly in a scene where they are figuring out how to leave. I obviously haven't read this book, but it feels like they took the book and took just the plot points and like plucked them and put them in a movie. They didn't take any of the characterization, they didn't take any of the in-betweens between these scenes for them to make sense. There's obviously no like lore or world building involved, like at all. It almost doesn't even feel like a full story, it just feels like a collection of things happening. There are really no consequences as far as we know. If the king does end up throwing her in the ocean, what happens? What happens? None of the characters in this movie have any chemistry whatsoever because none of them have any personality. There are no consequences, nobody learns any lessons, nobody changes by the end. I guess the unicorn can technically now feel regret. I don't know why she would feel regret about that situation, but basically nothing happens. Honestly, this is a movie that probably should have just stayed in my childhood. Anyways, like I said, it is currently free on YouTube. You can watch it if you want. It's incredibly boring. A lot of the runtime is just the same song, so be prepared for that. This movie is weird, it is boring, and it is not good. My rating for this movie is a C for childhood nostalgia, but that's really all I have to say about this movie. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.